The views and opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Open Sky Radio. Please be advised.
Good day, everybody, and welcome to The Fire You Can't Put Out. With you, as usual, it is I, Melvin. Thank you for joining us for episode 33 for the week ending September 6th of this week. Doing the show on a Friday. Now, I want to say something real. There's an awful lot going on with respect to Syria right now. And we're going to cover some of Syria today, but the thing about this show is we try to cover a lot of the things that the media does not. And then we try to cover things that we find are very important, but were not covered by the media, perhaps in a way that we here, as average Joes, Melvin here on the mic, would cover them. So we'll get to Syria a little bit, but and hold all questions, okay? Next week, the president is giving a speech on Tuesday, a major policy speech. With as fast as news is breaking, with as much as is going on, with the G8 just ending, okay, and Obama visiting Russia, which was just cold, figuratively and otherwise. We'll get to that stuff, but we're not going to cover it a lot on this show. I do have something to say, but the larger part of the mess that is Syria, that is knocking on our front door, that will be covered mostly next week. Anyway, aside from that, thank you for joining us. We're going to start with a couple of updates. We're going to get into Obamacare. We've got our DMs. Of course, we will be debunking right-wing talking points. And as usual, the light and the interesting. So, let us start with a couple of updates. Dead. That was the surprising headline this week. And none of us were anticipating it. Convicted kidnapper and rapist Ariel Castro was found dead on Tuesday evening, 19 Action News reported. On August 1st, Castro was sentenced to life plus 1,000 years for kidnapping and raping Amanda Berry, Michelle Knight, and Gina DeJesus and holding them captive in his Cleveland home for more than a decade. He pleaded guilty to 937 counts, including murder, kidnapping, in exchange for the death penalty being taken off the table, CNN reported. During the sentencing, Castro denied being abusive and insisted that most of the sex was consensual. I'm not a violent person, Castro said. I simply kept them there without them being able to leave. These crazy words left his mouth, and I don't think he really understood them. The three women disappeared separately between 2002 and 2004. They escaped on May 6th, and according to Joe Ellen Smith of the Ohio Department of Corrections, Castro was found hanging in his prison cell at the Correctional Reception Center in Orient, Ohio, around 9:20 p.m. Tuesday. So this past Tuesday, that would have been the 3rd. Although prison medical staff performed life-saving measures, he was later pronounced dead at the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center. At the time of his death, Castro was isolated from other inmates for his own protection. Ohio State Police and the Corrections Department are investigating the death. He survived 33 days in prison. This is the second high-profile death in Ohio. On August 4th, death row inmate Billy Slagle was found hanged in his cell just days before his scheduled execution. He was condemned to death for fatally stabbing a neighbor. Castro was in his cell for 23 hours a day. He was checked on every half an hour, and it was staggered. I've heard quite a few interviews with corrections officers, some on, some off the record, and read a few stories, and it's right now. And here's the thing. First of all, I don't think too many people care. I'm not going to join the throngs of people who went on social media and otherwise and absolutely jubilantly celebrated a death. He kept these women locked up for, depending on who it was, between 10 and 12 years. And he couldn't even handle 33 days of what he dished out to these 3 women. And he wasn't even being raped in prison. And he couldn't handle it. Or maybe he was. Maybe we'll find out later. But it says he was in isolation, so I don't think that's the case. And there's a lot of people celebrating the death, and there's a lot of people saying, well, he saved us the money. I think he should have had to do the time. He got out easy. But it is what it is. And what it seems like is if an investigation is done, we might find out that it was by his own hand. We might find out that it was not by his own hand. Officers are saying that there were no bed sheets in his cell to hang himself with. So this is an interesting one. We'll update you if there's more, but for right now, it sounds like good riddance to bad rubbish. He got to go to hell a little early. A few months ago, we reported on Sweet Cakes by Melissa, the shop in Oregon that denied to a same-sex couple, a lesbian couple. They said that they were not going to make their cake because of their strict religious beliefs. The Oregon bakery, which sparked the ire of the same-sex marriage advocates nationwide by refusing to bake a wedding cake for a lesbian couple, has closed up shop. This just happened this week. As Willamette Week first reported, Sweet Cakes by Melissa closed its storefront on Saturday, August 31st, as the shop is not open for business on Sundays. This will be our last weekend at the shop. We're moving our business to an indoor home bakery. On August 30th entry on Sweet Cakes Facebook says, I will post our new number soon. Email will stay the same. Melissa@sweetcakesweb.com. Meanwhile, KOIN reports that a sign hinting at the controversy that ensued after coworker Aaron Klein cited his religious beliefs in turning away the lesbian brides-to-be earlier this year appeared on the bakery's door a day after the shop closed for good. This fight is not over, the sign read, according to one report. We will continue to stand strong. Your religious freedom is becoming not free anymore. This is ridiculous that we cannot practice our faith. The Lord is God. The way this blah. Okay, fine. So, I heard an interview this week with Miss Klein on a local radio show. And she essentially said the same thing. Now, what was interesting was the interviewer asked her, do you regret your decision to not make this cake? And she says, absolutely not. The Lord works in such wonderful ways, and it's been so great to watch the Lord's work through this whole thing. And she says that this is not discrimination. What she practiced here was not discrimination. This was simply them asserting their religious freedom. Well, it's not. It is discrimination. And the biggest reason that they lost their business, and these are her words, is of course, there were people who popped in from time to time and got a cupcake or a cookie or whatever. But by and large, more than half their business were regular large order customers. And those people simply dropped off because of public pressure. And you lost your business because of discrimination. The whole time I'm hearing the interview, I feel bad for her because you can hear it in her voice. She's very sad. She's a little choked up and she's losing the business or moving it inside her house. She says that, they have to keep taking down their Facebook page because of the really poisonous comments that keep going up. They take it down, they put it back up. They take it down, they put it back up. There's obviously a lot of hate being directed at them. But to say, this is our religious freedom. Discrimination, that's your religious freedom. Here's the thing. I'm not the person to defend faith, and I'll be the first to say it. But if your faith includes hate and discrimination, although I'm not one who believes in God, I would like to think that if there is a God, that he is not a bigot. I don't know that your business will ever come back. You're in Oregon. You're pretty close to Portland. And it's wildly liberal around here. Non-discriminatory. very open, very accepting. Yeah, there's a lot of hipsters around here, but for the most part, we're not like that. So, Sweet Cakes by Melissa. I never knew you, and I ain't never gonna know you. Obviously the gun culture in this country still is what it has been for some time, and it seems to be that that's the way that people like it. We got a story this week about a 1-year-old boy being shot to death in his stroller. I try to bring one of these stories a week, not because I like bad news and not because I like reporting about death, but it's strange to me. I've got a couple of daughters myself, and if ever I lost even one of them, I don't know that I would be able to carry on. If I did, it would be incredibly hard. So the fact that children are being slaughtered by the hundreds and thousands, not all in one place at one time, but they are absolutely being slaughtered. And that guns, like after these murders happen, we run to the aid and comfort of the gun and the gun owner. I think that shows, quite honestly, where our values really are. This comes from New York. Police investigating the death of a 1-year-old boy shot in his head in his stroller Monday, and they believe that the father was the intended target. Authorities have some leads in the killing of Antiq Hennis on a Brooklyn street on Sunday night and believe his death may be gang-related. Antique's father, Anthony Hennis, has a criminal record. It wasn't cooperating with police in their investigation, said Kelly, who wouldn't elaborate. Hennis, 21, had just gone to pick up Antique at the home of the baby's mother, Sharice Miller, to take him to visit Hennis' grandmother, police said. Hennis put the boy in the stroller and was pushing him across the street in the Brownsville neighborhood when shots rang out. Hennis' grandmother, Lenore Steele, said she heard shots before Hennis ran up to her. And he fell to the ground. Said, "Grandma, my baby got shot. My baby got shot," said Steele. Flanked by community group leaders and mayoral candidates, Bill Thompson. 4 shots were fired. 1 hit Antique in the left side of his head, and he was declared dead on arrival at the hospital. Hennis and Miller couldn't immediately be reached for comment Monday. Possible phone numbers for their homes were disconnected or rang unanswered. The offices of attorneys who may have represented Hennis were closed, and activists who spoke at a news conference said Miller wouldn't be making a statement Monday. Antique's killing was the second case of a toddler being shot in the head in his stroller this year. I think it's really important that these stories not just become sort of secondary and sort of, another day, another death. It's poverty, I think, that leads to gangs and territorialism that eventually leads to gang violence. It's definitely poverty. Poverty plays a gigantic role. There are quite a few stories out there of linking poverty and violence. I'm working on one right now, and I'd really like to bring it to you next week. Also, more on gun violence. Rest in peace, Antique, 1-year-old. It should never happen. A child should never, ever, ever have to bury their child, and even worse, a child should never, ever, ever have to bury their infant who was murdered. And the interesting thing about Antique's father not saying anything and not cooperating with police, that's code of the streets. For those of you not familiar, it's called the Stop Snitching campaign. And the idea, especially in some of the urban neighborhoods, is government's bad, police are bad. Here in our neighborhood, we run things. We are our own law, and we will do what we want. And we're not gonna, and because we're all in this group, this one neighborhood or that one neighborhood or whatever. This is why the murders of Tupac Shakur and Christopher Notorious B.I.G. Wallace were never solved. The No Snitching campaign. We don't snitch. Murders happen. Murderers go free. Perhaps we here in the hood, we'll go after the murderers, but you will not snitch. And it seems his father, I'd have to dig more in the story, but it seems gang, code of the streets, no snitching. It seems to be what his father is engaging in, and it's too bad. It's his 1-year-old baby. Oh, mercy. All right. So, those are your updates. That is violence. Let's get into Obamacare. Forward. Marching. Freedom with extra freedom sauce and 20% more freedom berries. Freedom. 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 Your Republican representatives in Congress are trying so hard to keep you free by keeping you sick. The symbolism that came out recently is getting pretty disgusting. Let me bring you this from the Washington Post. They're reporting that FreedomWorks is having younger people compare Obamacare to a military draft and organizing them to burn their Obamacare draft cards. Quoting the Washington Post piece, Grimes was among half a dozen conservative college activists visiting Washington in late July for a Young Americans for Liberty convention. That FreedomWorks taped burning the mock draft cards. The footage will become an instructional video for other college activists who FreedomWorks hopes will participate. Now, I found an op-ed piece written by a gentleman. Gosh, I lost his name. Forgive me. Who, just follow me. Draftees made up 25% of those who fought in Vietnam, nearly 650,000 young Americans. They accounted for over 30% of the casualties, well over 17,000 who lost their lives. When young Americans burned their draft cards, it wasn't a selfish act. It was a protest against a war and the policy that forced too many young Americans with no means to avoid it to fight and possibly die. Right now we have what we call, or like to call, an all-volunteer military. And it sounds good, right? It's a tested term. It's a focus group tested term. People like it. All-volunteer military. It sounds like, hey, I wanted to go. Yes, I wanted to die. Well, good for you. Not really. Because here's what happens with an all-volunteer military. And I, by the way, am all for bringing back the actual draft. In an all-volunteer military, there's only two people that sign up. Those who are really, really, really pro-military and those who need the job. Okay? And so for these guys who were drafted to go to war and die for something they didn't want anything to do with, I think this is part of the reason that we had so many protests against the war. Of course, there's a lot of people protesting the potential war in Syria right now. But I think there'd be way more if we had a plan of action to go into Syria and we had a draft. I think that the Iraq war may not have happened or would have been incredibly shorter had there been a draft. And I think the reason we don't have a draft is because it keeps too many people from protesting. It keeps the discontent with war out of the public eye. Okay? But the draft cards took completely unwilling people who didn't set the policy, who didn't start the war, and it suited them up, gave them a gun, sent them to a foreign land, and let them get killed for nothing. I'm not going to say wars never solved anything, but armed conflict, by and large, solves, well, really nothing. I can't think of anything it has solved. Back to the op-ed piece. For a far right-wing group to use callow youth to make light of the horrendous sacrifices suffered by a generation, both for and against war, I find disgraceful and offensive. The cause of health care is a far different prospect than my peers face. This is the gentleman writing the op-ed article. A walk past a long black memorial filled with names on the National Mall is stark evidence of that. Most of us would be astounded that their names and ours are being taken in vain in our history, callously perverted to foster a parochial cause as weak as a. opposing health care for all. And that's all it is. But obviously the right-wing idea is Obamacare is going to lead to death. They're counting on your ignorance. They really are. Let me get into a little bit more Obamacare. This comes from the Daily Kos. Georgia insurance official gleeful about the Obamacare sabotage. Only a Republican would be happy about being in a position to deny thousands of people health insurance, but that's what one insurance commissioner is absolutely giddy about. And I quote, "Let me tell you what we're doing about Obamacare," it's in parentheses. Georgia Insurance Commissioner Ralph Hudgens bragged to a crowd of fellow Republicans in Floyd County earlier this month. We're doing everything in our power to be obstructionist. He's saying it. Okay? After pausing to let applause roll over him, yay, death, sickness, yay, a grinning Hudgens went on to give an example of that obstructionist behavior. This one involving so-called navigators who are being hired to guide customers through the process of buying health insurance on marketplaces or exchanges set up under the federal program. Quote, "We have passed a law that says that a navigator, which is a position in that exchange, has to be licensed by our Department of Insurance," Hudgens said. "The Obamacare law says that we cannot require them to be an insurance agent," so he said, "Fine, we'll just require them to be a licensed navigator. So we're going to make up the test, and basically you have to take the insurance agent test. You erase the name, you write navigator test on it. It's not just Hudgens. Since the administration made grants available to states to fund these navigators, the people who will help the uninsured figure out the new system, the efforts of a number of states, Ohio, Missouri, Florida, to name a few, to interview with this process have made the news. It's now on the radar for House Republicans, too, who are investigating the program, or, more to the point, harassing and intimidating organizations, mostly nonprofits, which are hiring and training the navigators. The House Energy and Commerce Committee sent out a 4-page letter to the organizations demanding information by September 13th and generally trying to gum up the works as these groups try to ramp up their efforts. So, they say, my God, Obamacare is going to take away your freedom. Obamacare is going to kill you. Obamacare is going to make you sick. But if it is, and it's bad policy, and it's a bad program, and it's going to lead to death and destruction and the 4 horsemen and whatever else you say it's going to lead to, then let it lead to that. The American people will decide. It's your own free market, right? Your own supposed free market principles. Let the people choose. Okay? There's nothing saying that they have to. Okay? Well, there's the mandate. There's a you'll pay a fine if you decide not to get insurance, but the insurance only works with a large umbrella. Think of it this way. If we have the single payer program goes like this. One insurer, okay? Every single person goes under that umbrella, okay? And all they do are pay the bills. They don't make decisions about your health. They just pay the bills when they come in from the doctors. It's that simple. With everybody under that umbrella, and this is what they have in Canada, whenever one person gets sick, no matter how sick they get, it doesn't ding the program too hard because there's plenty of money. Every single person is paying into it. Okay, now think about, I'm just going to throw a round number out there, 10,000 insurance companies in America, okay? And all the people in America are spread across those thousands of insurance companies. Some of those insurance companies have millions. Some of them have thousands. Okay? But the smaller the group that's underneath that umbrella, the harder the insurance company is hit when somebody makes a claim. So if you've got a small insurance company, somebody gets cancer, there's only a few hundred people on the insurance, it's probably going to wipe out that insurance company. But the larger that tent gets, the larger that umbrella gets, the less and less the pain you feel whenever somebody has to make a claim against that system. Okay? So that's the idea. So with Obamacare, trying to get everybody either with insurance or underneath that larger umbrella that they're setting up, which isn't going to have everybody. That would have been single payer, and that's what I wanted. Okay? If that isn't going to work, then let it play itself out. This is not socialized healthcare. The government has not come in and taken over healthcare. That's not at all what has happened. this will still be administered by private insurance companies. This was the Heritage Foundation's idea. This was their idea back in the 90s. This is what they came up with to be the complete antithesis of Hillary Care. This is what they came up with in response to Hillary Care. And now it's socialism. Now it's socialized medicine. Now it's going to lead to elderly genocide and all the rest. Pull a plug on grandma. If it's not going to work, stand back, cons. Let it not work. The American people will see that if that is the case. But what I'm pretty sure of, I'm pretty sure you're afraid it's going to work. And that's why you're trying to sabotage it. My. The party of death and destruction. Let us get into our DMs. Oh boy. I'm sorry. Representative Louie Gohmert from Texas filled in for Tony Perkins on the Family Research Council Washington radio show Monday, where he interviewed ultra-conservative activist Alan Keyes. Louie Gohmert and Alan Keyes got right down to business discussing the worldwide conspiracy by manatee-loving elitists to depopulate the world via a sinister plan of energy efficiency and increased health care access. Did you catch that? Energy efficiency and healthcare access are going to depopulate the world. Follow. The former presidential candidate said efforts to prevent global warming, which has been proven to be wrong, he says, are part of a plan to cut back the population of the world. Keyes also made a reference to Bill Gates, who has been attacked by conspiracy theorists for explaining that vaccinations and increased healthcare access slow population growth. Keyes told Gohmert that elites are bent on culling the population and actually believe that we're a blight on the face of the planet. We're human beings, and we should therefore be put on a path toward our own semi-extinction. He went on, I often try to get people to see that if you think about it, if we actually get back to the levels they're talking about, it would just be these elitists and the people needed to serve them. That's all that would be left in the world. Healthcare, energy efficiency. It's going to kill us all. Alan Keyes and Louie Gohmert, you two suck. I mean, you are a DM. Ted Cruz wants to be your president, but Ted Cruz is a birther. Senator Ted Cruz is very unhappy about the Supreme Court ruling, which held that Arizona cannot demand documentary evidence of United States citizenship as a condition of registering to vote in federal elections. The ruling has opened a hole in the law, he says, that will allow non-citizens to register and thereby encourages voter fraud. He has therefore vowed to file a common-sense amendment to the immigration bill that permits states to require ID before registering voters. This raises a fascinating question. How would Cruz himself go about providing documentary evidence of his own citizenship? As it happens, he was born in Canada, where his parents were working at the time. Thus, his birth certificate cannot provide any such proof. And because he claims citizenship by birth, he would never have had any reason to obtain a certificate of naturalization. According to Cruz's official website, however, his mother was born and raised in Delaware, which is quite sufficient under law to confer citizenship on Ted, if we take his word for it. On the other hand, what if we demanded the fabled documentary evidence? Ted Cruz, where are your papers? I suppose Cruz could produce his mother's birth certificate as well as his own, thus establishing his descent from a citizen. Alas, things are more complicated than that. Cruz's father is a Cuban emigre who was not yet a U.S. citizen when Cruz was born in 1970. Thus, Cruz himself falls under a special section of the Immigration and Nationality Act that governs birth abroad to one citizen and one alien parent. Under that provision, Cruz only qualifies for citizenship if his mother was physically present in the United States for 10 years prior to his birth. 5 of that which had to be after she reached the age of 14. How is he going to document that? His mother graduated from Rice University in 1956, so that's obviously 4 years right there, but we're not talking about things that are obvious. At least if Cruz succeeds in passing an amendment restoring the Arizona law. We're talking about documentary evidence, so it would not be enough to assume Cruz's mother lived in the United States for at least 10 years. We would need some proof, maybe school registration or utility bills. Or perhaps Ms. Cruz could simply provide an affidavit explaining that she lived in either Delaware or Texas until she turned 19. While that would be adequate under a system such as the National Voter Registration Act, it would not constitute documentary evidence. Remember, it is the sufficiency of affidavits that Arizona rejected in the first place and which Cruz calls an invitation to fraud. Under this bill, he wouldn't be able to vote. He wouldn't be able to become president. Well, what about Cruz's passport? Well, we'll just cut through the whole mess since passports are only issued to U.S. citizens. Sorry, but again, we run into the sticky evidence problem. The popular narrative with the conservatives, obviously, has been that Barack Obama was not born in America. Never, ever, ever before, of all the presidents we've had, we've never, ever asked a president whether or not they were born in America. Ever. Ever. No matter how much we dislike them. Never, ever, ever. One president. Barack Obama. He's the only one. And they say it's not because of race. Of course it's not. He's the only black one you're accusing of not being born here. Black people are born in America all the time. Fine. Okay, fine. It can't be him. His mother. His mother was born here. Yeah, his father wasn't, but his mother was born here. Just like Ted Cruz's. Now does it count? Of course it doesn't. And why doesn't it? Well, we've got evidence. No, you don't. He released his birth certificate. That's not the right birth certificate. We want the long form. He released his long form. That's a fraud. It's a fraud because you're engaging in confirmation bias. You only believe what you want to believe. You're a conspiracy theorist. And anything to the contrary only strengthens your conspiracy. You're nuts. You're all nuts. But you're silent because you want Ted Cruz to be president. He has to be president. Think about that, nut jobs. All right, so this from Media Matters. Special thanks to Daily Kos and Media Matters. Fox News doesn't believe in climate change, so it's hard for them to say the word. So they just look around at the eroding Florida beaches like the fools they are and scratch their heads saying, what could be happening to Florida beaches? Fox News reported on the very unusual problem of diminishing sand at Florida beaches. This is real. This is real. Terming it an environmental crisis of the future. However, the network did not mention that the phenomenon's connection to the sea level rise, a major consequence of climate change. Tuesday's edition of Happening Now correspondent Phil Keating checked in from the Miami Beach to relate some of the beaches in Florida are running out of sand. Oh, my. Okay, I'm sorry. Back to the story. This, he said, threatens the region's booming beach tourism industry and indirectly weakens an important buffer against hurricane damage as municipalities are forced to take sand from offshore to replace what has been lost. The segment went on to explain that Broward County, which contains Fort Lauderdale, has considered grinding up glass to substitute for sand. Any mention of climate change? Nope. Any mention of sea rise due to climate change? Nope. Any mention of coastal development as part of the problem? Nope. Fox News has been found to be a driving force behind global warming denial. The Republicans and their propaganda machine Fox News have humanity's blood on their hands. There's a story. Steve Wilson and Jane Aker. I'm going to dig it up and I'm going to bring it to you one of these days. But you can look it up now if you're near a computer. The case of, I believe it's Fox News, RGBH, Steve Wilson, Jane Aker. It's a big case with a Fox affiliate down in Florida. But it's the case that Fox essentially won that gives them the right to lie. Like they went to court to fight for the right to lie, and Fox News won. I'll dig it up and bring it to you one of these days. But for right now, hell, just go look at it yourself. They're not ashamed of lying. Steve Womack, Republican of Arkansas, speaking at a town hall on Tuesday, described a conversation with a local business owner who said, "We'd love to expand. Problem is we can't fill the workers we need now," Womack continued. And I say, why? And he says, well, couple of good reasons. One, a lot of them can't pass the drug test. That's one. Number two, some of them say, call me when my unemployment runs out. In the same week, Ohio's Rep. Bill Johnson, responding to a constituent asking if the government could drug test welfare recipients, said, surely, believe it or not, we actually passed some legislation in 2011 to do exactly that. It was part of unemployment compensation reform. But there are employers up and down the river in Ohio say, I can't find workers because the kind of job that we need them to do, I can't find people that can pass the drug test. And those people will come in and they will find out they got to take a drug test, and then they'll leave and won't take the drug test because, they'll use their unemployment checks for buying drugs. Yeah, this is the whole Ronald Reagan welfare queen thing. There's tons of jobs, but everybody's on drugs and unemployment. We reported a few weeks ago from Utah. Utah had this program, and they found 12 people. 12 people didn't pass the drug test. 12. They did this down in Florida also, and Florida lost just a mountain of money and really didn't find anybody. Couple people, person here, person there. So this week, Representative Dave Joyce of Ohio also lamenting the jobs go unfilled. There's so many jobs, but you're all high and on unemployment. You're so high. And the trouble is, it's because they can't find people to come to work sober, daily, drug-free, and want to learn the necessary skills going forward to be able to do those jobs. It's a lie. It's a lie. But they can't explain why there's no jobs. They can't say, hey, we're sending jobs overseas. They can't say, hey, we have slaves. We have people that are willing to accept less than a living wage. They can't say that because that's where the policies lead. So what do they say? Everyone's on drugs and lazy. It's not true. I don't know anybody who's like that. I don't know everybody in the world, obviously, but I don't know anybody like that. I want you to remember these 3 words and phrases: gridlock, failed to pass the bill, and the government maxed out its credit card. Because they're all lies. They're all jokes. And this comes from truthout.org. Shout out to them. I keep reading that Congress is suffering from gridlock, but if they were suffering from gridlock, wouldn't that mean that they were working on too many things at once? See, gridlock is a traffic jam. Gridlock occurs when there are too many cars, so they back up across intersections and block other cars from crossing. Congress wouldn't be gridlocked if they were working on so many things at once that they were backing up and getting in each other's way. Don't call it gridlock, call it obstruction. They're not doing anything right now. Anything. But gridlock makes it like they're just doing so much stuff at once. And Boner highlighted this a few weeks ago when he said we shouldn't be judged by how many bills we pass. We should be judged by how many bills we don't pass. That's not gridlock. That's doing nothing. They're obstructing. Okay. Debunked. The Senate failed to pass the bill or confirm the nominee. Over the last several years, the media has reported again and again that the Senate has failed or didn't get enough votes to pass a bill or confirm a nominee. They say Senate rules require 60 votes to pass a bill. I'm going to step away from the article for a minute. That's a lie. It's not true. The Constitution says a majority. A majority would be 51. The Republicans require 60. I continue. But this is not what's happening. What is going on is the Senate, bill after bill and nominee after nominee, is being filibustered. When they don't get 60, the Republicans just filibuster. Failed to pass implies that the Senate, and by extension the people, didn't want something to pass or a nominee confirmed. It also conveys that government fails, but a filibuster is something completely different. A filibuster occurs when the majority of the Senate does not want something. A filibuster is an obstruction to democracy. When something doesn't make it past the Senate because of a filibuster, call it what it is. A filibuster, which is obstruction. Gridlock. Not gridlock. They're not doing anything. Obstruction. Couldn't pass the bill. Required 60 votes. They could pass the bill. They had a majority, but it got filibustered because it didn't get 60. Debunked. Very soon, Washington will be absorbed in the fight over its debt ceiling. Again and again, the public is told that the debt ceiling fight is about the government maxing out its credit card. But this is not at all what the debt ceiling fight is about. It's about Congress authorizing the president to pay the amount due on the credit card that Congress has been using. This is what I love about when people say, Obama's spending too much money. Obama can't spend money. It's spent by Congress, the Congress that you sent there. And when they don't want to pay the bill, you blame Obama. Think about it, folks. This is very, very important. The accurate way to explain what this fight is about is to say that raising the debt ceiling authorizes the president to pay the bills that the Congress has already run up. The debt ceiling is a limit or ceiling on how much debt the government is allowed to carry. A version of this limit was first put in place by Congress in 1917 as part of a bond act to help pay for World War I, and then an overall debt limit in 1939. After the Reagan tax cuts, which primarily went on to the wealthy, the country began to run enormous deficits, which add to the country's debt. Clinton passed tax increases, and we started paying off this debt, and then Bush 2 passed tax cuts again for the wealthy, and then left office with a final year deficit of $1.4 trillion. The Republican Congress refuses to restore the tax rates that the wealthy used to pay before we had these large deficits. But the fact is that it costs money to run a large country, and every year the Congress authorizes spending that is greater than the tax revenue collected. So more money goes out than is coming in because of the country. Because of this, the country periodically reaches a new debt limit. Congress then fights over increasing this limit. This does not mean that the government is spending too much. These are things a government must do, and there are many places where cuts could actually force increases in spending on other items. For example, cutting food for the elderly increases spending on hospital care and nursing homes. For example, cutting spending on infrastructure means fewer people are employed, and that means over time the economy becomes less efficient and less competitive, of which slow tax revenue and force increases in social program spending. But cutting social program spending forces increase on crime fighting and prison spending. And it's easy. When they make these cuts, that just drives the cost of everything up. So remember, it's not gridlock. They're not doing anything. Okay? They didn't fail to pass the bill. They passed it, and then it was filibustered. Obstruction. The government didn't max out its credit card. Congress spent a ton of money and then said that damn president can't pay the bill. Debunking the right wing. The KKK and NAACP had a historic meeting this past week. Leaders from branches of the KKK and NAACP had a historic meeting in Casper, Wyoming on Saturday to discuss the recent acts of violence against black men and the distribution of KKK pamphlets in the area. Jimmy Simmons, president of the Casper branch of the NAACP, had reached out to John Abar of the United Klansmen of America about a meeting in June, according to the Casper Star-Tribune. Oh, shout out to them for this story. The two didn't meet until several ground rules were established, including an agreement to meet under heavy security. The two discussed the KKK's desire to secede from the Union. Wait. The KKK wants to secede from the Union. There was a story also this week that Northern California wants to secede from the rest of California. Texas wants to secede from the Union. After Barack Obama was reelected to be president, there were about a half a dozen red states that said, we want to secede. Wait a minute. The KKK too wants to secede? I'm sure there's absolutely no connection between the right wing wanting to concede and the KKK. And the two discussed the KKK's desire to secede from the Union, segregation and violence against black men. Okay. Abar revealed that he saw an uptick in new members after the election of President Barack Obama and shared why he likes being in the Klan. He said, and I quote, "This is Abar. I like it because you wear robes, get out and light crosses, and have secret handshakes," Abar said. "I like being in the Klan. I sort of like it that people think that I'm some sort of outlaw." But Abar, who believes violence against black men is a hate crime and touts his group as a non-violent religious organization focused on political issues, said his branch of the KKK isn't hateful enough for some and that he really likes to recruit radical kids and then calm them down after they join. Abar went on to say, a certain amount of segregation is a good thing. White police would stay in white neighborhoods, black officers in black neighborhoods. Color blindness doesn't even make sense. Interracial marriage? No. It's better if the races are kept separate, completely opposed because we want white babies, he says. His laugh rattles like a slow roll over a highway rumble strip. So the KKK says, we need segregation. They're not violent. They are just a religious group. Hate-driven violence may still occur, but those perpetrators are hoodlums. He says there's no proof that that's Klan violence. And then they were challenged. I think that based on your history, based on the Klan's history, it's hard to shed the skin of your group of not being violent, not being killers, murderers, and terrorizers. It's hard to imagine that. The Klan is a secret society, and a bar won't discuss how it evolved or what it does. It's a canned answer. He just reads off of a piece of paper. It's interesting that they decided to come together and talk. I would have never seen that happening. But they did. I guess it's good they did. It doesn't sound like anything got solved, but I think we learned something very important. All right, let me go on to this. This was a bill I hoped would have passed, the Supreme Court Ethics Act. A group of congressional Democrats set out to introduce legislation Thursday that would apply stricter ethical standards to the Supreme Court amid concerns that justices have been engaging in questionable behavior. The proposed Supreme Court Ethics Act of 2013 would subject the justices to a code of conduct for United States judges, a set of standards that currently applies to all other federal judges. Those rules would have forced the justices to recuse themselves from certain cases or explicitly prohibited some high-profile activities that have attracted scrutiny and demand for reform in the past few years. The controversy over Supreme Court ethics reemerged late last month when Mother Jones reported that Ginny Thomas, a well-connected Tea Party consultant and wife of Justice Clarence Thomas, held an integral role in Groundswell, a conservative coalition of journalists and activists that has been meeting privately to coordinate talking points and messaging on key political issues. The revelation led to a new round of questions about whether her brand of partisan activism should constitute a conflict of interest for her husband, who has been tasked with ruling on many of the issues that she is involved in. She also makes a sweet amount of change from these groups. Currently, the Supreme Court's system for dealing with conflicts of interest or appearances of conflicts is to leave each justice's own best judgment. In the past, justices have recused themselves from cases apparently because they held significant stock in a company before the court or when their adult offspring were professionally involved in the case. But Thomas took part in the Obamacare decision, which his wife spoke out very heavily against in organized marches and speeches and all the rest against. Reform advocates have similarly noted that Justices Antonin Scalia and Thomas attended Coke industry fundraisers in 2010, just months after siding with the majority in a landmark Citizens United case which says that corporations are people. The bill, which was introduced by Representative Louise Slaughter, Chris Murphy, and Sheldon Whitehouse, probably isn't going to go anywhere. But it's an important bill. And I would like to think that it could. So we'll pay attention to that one for you. Here is some good news. Ruth Bader Ginsburg becomes the first Supreme Court member, the first SCOTUS member to officiate a gay wedding. This from Salon.com. On Saturday, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg put on her finest neck doily and made history as the first member of the United States Supreme Court to officiate at a gay wedding. Ginsburg conducted the ceremony between John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, President Michael M. Kaiser, and economist John Roberts, both longtime friends. It's very meaningful, mostly to have a friend officiate, and then for someone of her stature, it's a very big honor, Kaiser told the Associated Press. I think that everything that's going on makes same-sex marriage possible and visible helps to encourage others to make the issue seem like less of an issue and to make it more just a part of life. In a Friday statement, Ginsburg called Kaiser a friend and someone I much admire, and that's why I'm officiating his wedding, she added. Sweet, sweet, sweet story. I just love it. The US Department of Peace. This is a story from 2012 when Dennis Kucinich was in office. He repeatedly brought up the idea of the U.S. Department of Peace. And I think it's a fine idea. And it's an idea it's long overdue. So, this is from 2012. The proposal has been submitted for consideration in every Congress since 2001, and the idea behind it is that the federal government could stop wars, pacify street gangs, and distill violence out of the American soul itself. All it would take is a new cabinet-level department and $10 billion a year in taxpayer money. But the ultimate Capitol Hill long shot, the US Department of Peace, is looking less likely than usual. It's losing its champion in the House. Dennis Kucinich lost his seat due to redistricting. Here's how the bill would have worked. Secretary of Peace would sit in the President's cabinet on the National Security Council. Secretary would be given a special role in the country's military decisions if a conflict was about to start. The Secretaries of Defense in the state would have to consult the Peace Secretary concerning non-violent means of conflict resolution. But the new department would be concerned with much more than foreign wars. It would also seek to stop bloodshed in U.S. cities by funding the Stop the Violence programs in schools, and unarmed civilian peacekeeping. There would also be a peace academy modeled after the military service academies. After 4 years, graduates would be required to spend 5 years in public service promoting conflict resolution at home or abroad. And the bill would encourage the establishment of Peace Day. Such day shall include discussions of professional activities and achievements in the lives of peacemakers, the bill says. The cost of all this, the bill asks for $10 billion a year. That's a little more than the Environmental Protection Agency and a little less than the Department of Commerce. But Kucinich's argument that if it worked, the Department of Peace would save money in the end. Let's talk Syria. There's a civil war going on in Syria that started about 2.5 years ago. And it started out of economic disparity. And since that time, there have been rebel groups that have been rising up against their current leader, President Assad. Now, so there's the Assad and the military that he runs, okay, which is the country's military. Then there's the rebels, and they're armed. So it's a civil war, what's going on over there right now. Here's what's very important to understand about the rebel groups. It's not just a group that call themselves the rebel. There are dozens, if not 100 or more groups. And they are, part of those groups is Al-Qaeda. Yeah, Al-Qaeda is in Syria fighting with the rebels. What we learned over the past number of months, thanks to pictures and videos posted to social media, is that children, hundreds if not thousands of children and adults, have been killed by being gassed. There are pictures of people convulsing and dying. There are floors just laid out with tons of children side by side. None of them bloody, none of them with holes, all of them just dead. And it's pretty apparent that what's going on over there right now is a very bloody civil war and a huge humanitarian crisis. President Obama has announced that he would like to strike Syria. Congress has been on vacation for 5 weeks. In the last week, President Obama asked that Congress come back because Congress says to him, you better ask us before you go to war. And he says, fine, come back. And I will ask you. And they said, no, we're on vacation for this last week. And then they went on Fox News and they go, can you believe this lazy president still not doing anything about Syria? That's for another day. But a few did come back in the Armed Services Committee. And they said, fine. They sat, they debated, and they came up with a bill that allows the president to strike Syria. They said it will all be boats in the Mediterranean Sea, and they will fire into the country. There will be no ground war. And the president has been pushing this. UK has said that they are absolutely not with us. Russia said they're not with us. Obama says maybe we'll go it alone. That bill that was passed this week and its language will be debated when the full Congress comes back next week. And on Tuesday, the president has a major policy speech. Weapons of mass destruction are being used. People are being killed. I can't believe we're going through this again. Now, here's the thing. The president might have a legitimate concern. Had the Iraq War never happened, had we never had to listen to the reasoning for the Iraq War, perhaps we would have been able to say, hey, you know what? Let's go in there and do something. But we're hearing all the exact same stuff that Bush said, and we found out that Bush lied. What's becoming apparent, though, is that for Syria, and by the way, it's bipartisan. There's Republicans against it, Republicans for it, Democrats against it, Democrats for it. But you know what? They're going to come together next week, and they are going to vote to go to war with Syria. That's my prediction, and it's probably not a safe prediction. And so right away, with the sequester, with food stamps, with medicine, Obamacare, and infrastructure, all these things that need money. This brings me to my final thought. We will always find money for wars. On this show, I've said dozens of times, since we started 33 episodes ago, that if it's war, they will find the money. If it feeds people, if it clothes them, if it takes care of them, if it gives them streets, if it gives them community centers, if it makes them better, if it makes them healthy, if it makes them happy, if it makes them Americans, we will not find the money for it. We will fight to make sure that they don't get it. But when it comes to war, we will find the money. If Congress votes to strike Syria, they will find the money for war. There will be no question. Why? Because that money will not be going into mine or your hands. It'll be going into the hands of military contractors. We covered last week about how wealthy some of those neighborhoods in D.C. are because they have military contractors living in them. Here's the other thing. I can't believe we're going through this again, and I can't believe we're going through this with Barack Obama. Because although the largest reason I voted for him was the Supreme Court, I thought I was getting a president that wasn't going to start another war. And they're saying all the same things. It's only going to last a couple of weeks. It's not going to cost that much. There shouldn't be any casualties. Quack, quack, quack. No, it's a war. I was thinking about this the other day. My youngest daughter was born in 2003. Or my oldest daughter, excuse me. Youngest, not that old. My oldest daughter was born in 2003. Just a number of months after the Afghanistan war started. And the Afghanistan war is still going on. My daughter has never been alive during a time when there was not an armed conflict that this country was involved in. When I was born in 1978, we had Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter is essentially the only president that I can think of during my lifetime that didn't start at least a little tiny war. My daughter, all three of my daughters, have never known a country, their country, never known a time when their country was not involved in armed conflict on foreign soil. There's a lot of people right now, a lot of Americans, thankfully. You can go to don'tattacksyria.com. Don'tattacksyria.com. There is a petition there set up by Representative Alan Grayson. There is a war about to happen. And most people are against that war. And they're voicing those opinions. And it unfortunately might happen anyway. And I think it's really important that we speak very loudly against this war. There's a civil war going on in Syria. We can't, and there's a huge humanitarian crisis. If we want to help, we can step in and help in a humanitarian effort. There'd be plenty of people willing to do that. The rebels right now who say they want to overthrow the Assad government, there was a tape released last week. I believe it was released by I think the New York Times got their hands on it and they released it. Showing the rebels lining up 6 of Assad's soldiers, reading from a decree, and then shooting all 6 of them in the back of the head. The rebels, as opposed as they are to Assad's government, they're becoming the regime that they detest, that they're fighting against. They're becoming that dangerous and poisonous regime themselves. And it's a civil war. Us dropping bombs is going to kill more people. you're helping both Assad and the rebels. And in a civil war, there's no way to make that end well. They said, well, we have to do something. We have to say something because we can't let this go unanswered. It's not going unanswered. And killing more people isn't going to solve it. The president has also said that regime change is not the point. Then what is the point? Think about it, Mr. President. We'll always find money for wars. And Dennis Kucinich, whom I greatly admire, we need your Department of Peace. I know it's a long shot. I know it's never going to happen. It's liberalism, 200-proof liberalism to even suggest such a thing. But I think it's very important. And we've never needed your Department of Peace more than we need right now. We're already bogged down in 2 incredibly heavy wars. And we're about to get into another. And it doesn't need to happen. That money should be spent here at home. When we say we can almost find money for, that's where it should end. We can almost find money for infrastructure. We can almost find money for healthcare. We can almost find money to feed our fellow Americans. That's how that sentence should end. It should not end, we can almost find money for war. Updates next week. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you again for joining me, sitting with me on this hour, episode 33 of The Fire You Cannot Put Out. I want to send a shout out to Angela, to Leo, and to Kevin. Even though your folks are not here with me right now, you are very much on my mind, and I look forward to getting all of you back on this microphone. Just remember, despair is not an option. Thank you for your continued support. We are the fire you can't put out, and we will prevail. I'll see you next week when hopefully we are not embroiled in another war. Good day.